Hi, this is Deb Wenger. Today we're talking about television, chapter 9 in your text. So this is one of my favorite chapters because I worked for many years in TV, and I find what's happening in the industry to be fascinating, and I hope you will enjoy thinking about it and talking about it yourself. So the invention of television, a guy by the name of Philo T. Farnsworth gets the credit for coming up with the diagrams that were used to create what became television in the early 1930s. So by 24, he had received a patent for the cathode ray tube. Despite RCA's efforts to confuse the issue and to make it sound like they were responsible for inventing television, Farnsworth is the person who historically, if you're going to be historically accurate, gets the credit for developing early television. Unfortunately for him, his patent expired a year before television really took off, so he didn't benefit much financially from developing early television. So in the beginning of broadcast TV, you had NBC was the first network on the air, and most TV sets were in bars and restaurants, so it was really a shared social experience, partly because TVs were expensive and not all that common. In fact, manufacturing of televisions was suspended during World War II. Of course, everything changed to gear up to produce munitions and other things needed for the war effort. And so most TV stations that had already gone on the air actually went off the air during that time period. The federal government took a few years from about 1948 to 1952 to try to figure out how to license broadcasters. And so during that time period, no new licenses were granted, and that left a lot of cities without any television at all. About the 1950s or so, television stations were more common and they began experimenting with color TV. Now you might remember from our discussion of the movie chapter that color was something that the movies incorporated into their genre much more rapidly than television did, in part because they saw it as a way to compete against television that was taking away their audiences. And from the TV network standpoint, it wasn't all that important for them to develop color technology because nobody was able to receive color because color TVs were so expensive. As your textbook points out, they cost what would have been equivalent to a big screen TV today. Of course, big screen costs have come way down in recent years. But for at least a good 5 to maybe 10 years, big screen TVs were pretty darn expensive. So at this point, you're sort of in the network heyday, right? So the three broadcast networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, really ruled the day until the 1980s when Fox entered the picture. Rupert Murdoch and News Corp came in and bought a bunch of big city affiliates and turned them into Fox network stations and started to become a major force by getting NFL games to broadcast. That was a real turning point for Fox. In 1986, 82% of American adults were watching TV daily. So this is a major cultural phenomenon. It's a major way that people spent their time. Advertising dollars, of course, supported free TV, and nearly every home in America, 91% of homes, had a TV set in 1985. So TV was everywhere. It was a major part of American lives, and most of the programming was controlled by these four entities. Prior to the 1970s, cable did exist. It was used essentially as a way to bring a broadcast signal into a community that couldn't otherwise receive it. But in the 1970s, the FCC started to loosen up the rules on what cable companies could do and how they could operate. A startup company by the name of HBO, Home Box Office, saw this as an opportunity and started to provide programming nationwide by distributing content to local cable companies via satellite. Now, this new technology allowed them to send programming to as many as 1,000 cable companies, let's say, for the same amount as it would have cost them to distribute it to one. In the early days of HBO, much of the programming was oriented around movies, hence the name Home Box Office. And you would see a movie that maybe had been in the theaters, 8 to 10 months earlier, well before it made it to broadcast TV. And so for a movie lover, for someone in a rural area that maybe didn't have a lot of access to movies, this was a terrific boon, and people were willing to pay for it and pay the premium that it costs to bring HBO into your home. At about the same time, a guy by the name of Ted Turner purchased a little-known TV station in Atlanta, Channel 17, and made a brilliant move to buy both the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Hawks. And then he had an outlet for broadcasting those games. So leveraging that, he was able to take what was then called Channel 17 and turn it into Superstation WTBS. So in 1976, this little local station that few people had heard of went national via cable. He didn't stop there, of course. In 1980, he launched CNN, which became the world's first cable 24-hour news network. Fast forward about 15 or so years, and CNN, Turner Broadcasting, was not in great financial shape. It was purchased by Time Warner, and of course CNN still has a significant impact on television today. We have CNN, we have CNN Headline News. CNN.com is one of the most trafficked websites in the world, CNN International. And of course, many other Turner products. Bleacher Report is owned by Turner. Cartoon Network is owned by Turner. So it's definitely still a force in media and in television in particular. So what's on cable now? So we're talking in the 1970s, mid-1970s, this really got started. So, fast forward about 35 years now, and we still see the big four networks on cable, as well as some additional networks that have developed in the interim. TNT is one. Local access channels, your textbook talks about this. This is the, Bob's Guide to Bugs. Some random person decides they want to go on television, and by and large, cable companies have to make some program time available to them. Cable networks, CNN, Fox News Channel, still very much a part of the cable universe. Premium channels, we still have HBO, we have Showtime and others. Pay-per-view, so this tends to be content in the sports world. People will pay to see a boxing match, let's say. And then even audio services, so a form of radio, music opportunities for people to listen to on cable. So cable's still very much a part of the television landscape. One of the things that really ate into the profits of broadcasters, or had the potential to eat into the profit of broadcasters, was the development of the video cassette recorder. So by the 1970s, they were in lots and lots of homes. It was the movie studios that fought this, and again, this is an example of one of the 7 truths. New technologies are always scary, and people are always jockeying for position to make sure that their financial pie does not get eaten by another entity. But in 1984, the Supreme Court said, nope, consumers, you can make recordings for your own use. The broadcast industry was concerned too, because VCR recordings allowed you to fast forward through commercials. And there was a fear that television programmers, those who produce the programming or broadcast the programming, would lose revenue if advertisers realized that not everyone was watching their ads with rapt attention. In the 21st century, we've gone through DVDs, of course, replacing the VCR, DVRs, digital video recorders, and then on-demand technology all have come along and replaced the VCR. Now, many of those are being replaced, or at least their dominance is being eaten into by streaming and the ability to not even worry about storing content because it's always there and accessible via the web. So another technological development that had a big impact on the broadcast industry was the conversion to digital broadcasting. So Farnsworth TV technology was analog. So all televisions encoded pictures by varying signal voltage and radio frequencies. Then we had the development of digital technology, and the FCC said this is a much more efficient way to broadcast and commanded that by 2009 all broadcast televisions be converted to digital. So all television stations had to be broadcasting a digital signal, which meant that analog TV sets won't work unless you have a conversion box or some kind of cable or satellite for your TV. There are two kinds of digital TV that we talk about a lot. We have the high definition TV. This is in widescreen format, so 16:9 aspect ratio. The sound is clearer. Generally, people say that HD format allows you, the high resolution of the HD format creates a higher quality television picture. There's still standard digital television, which the increased quality isn't there. It's the same as the quality of the old analog signal. But what this allows you to do is broadcast more channels in the same airspace that was carried by one old style channel. So the signals are compressed to the point that with the same amount of bandwidth, let's say, you can broadcast 6 signals as compared to the one you would have been able to broadcast with the old analog signal. So why is this important? In the industry, if you go into the broadcast industry, there's a lot of talk about how you might use the multiplex, the multicasting approach to enhance the money-making opportunities for a TV station. So if on the same amount of bandwidth I can broadcast 6 different types of content, then I have 6 potential ways to make money off of television. It's important that you understand the business of television, especially the relationship between the networks and the affiliates, because many of you will likely end up going into local television news or local television programming. So the way it works is the broadcast networks provide programming to local affiliate stations. So WTVA in Tupelo is an NBC affiliate. It gets content from NBC, which it airs, and it makes a little bit of money off of local ads, which are aired within NBC programming. NBC makes money because it airs national ads and shows them then to the Tupelo TV station audience. Affiliates have to be licensed from the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission. Obviously, they have to have broadcast equipment and they have to have a staff to put this all on the air. Advertising generated by local news in particular accounted for about half of an average station's overall revenue in 2013. So news is a major and significant player within the local TV broadcast environment. There's a supplemental video that I want you to watch that talks a little bit about the jobs available in television newsroom. It's not just a reporter's game. There are many other positions that you may want to consider if the idea of working for a local TV station interests you. So all of this has been funded throughout the years by advertising, and ratings are an important component of understanding how advertising supports the television that we've watched for years and years. So most TV is paid for by advertising, and the cost of that advertising, how much the TV station can charge for the time that a commercial takes up, is determined by a rating system. So ratings measure how many and what type of people are watching TV programs. So sheer numbers, households with a particular program on, and then some kind of snapshot of what those people look like. So you'll often hear, at least if you're working in the TV business, the coveted demographic for a lot of TV advertisers is 18 to 49 women. 18 to 49 women are really highly sought after target audience because it's believed that they do most of the household buying. So they're deciding what detergent to use, or they're deciding whether or not it's time to get a new couch. And so advertisers will often target that demographic because they think they're more likely to be able to influence women to purchase things in programs that a lot of women are already watching. Obviously, if you look at a sporting event, you'll see tons of car commercials and beer commercials and, gorgeous women in scantily clad. Well, they're targeting the men that they believe are watching those programs. So ratings is a measurement that determines who's watching and how many of those people are watching. The challenge now, of course, is tracking audience across devices. So if I'm watching a sporting event on my iPad, how is Nielsen capturing? Nielsen is a big ratings company. How is Nielsen capturing my view of the same sporting event as somebody who's watching with a device that's tracking it on their television set? In addition, it's useful to understand some of the terminology behind it. So a rating point, so if you say a program has a 10 rating, that means that 10% of every possible person who could have been watching this program was watching the show. A share, so a share of 10%, says that of all the people who were actually watching TV, not all the potential audience, but of all the people actually watching, 10% were watching my particular show. So this is the terminology that advertisers, if you're thinking about a career in advertising, or you're wondering, you may have come across stories that talk about the most highly rated show on television. For many years, 60 Minutes is often the big kahuna each week with millions of people tuning in to watch. The Super Bowl, they talk about the ratings for the Super Bowl. So you'll understand a little bit about the numbers and what they actually mean when they're talking about ratings and share. So I don't know if I have to tell you this. You might not have thought about all the things that are happening to shake up television, but we are in an era of major change. I think your textbook talks about an earthquake in slow motion. Well, we're no longer moving in slow motion in the TV industry. On the one hand, the average American still watches almost 5 hours of TV per day. That is a lot of television. On the other hand, more than 196 million Americans watch online video every day. That's approximately 78% of all the people that use the web are watching some kind of online content. Advertising, which continues to be an incredibly important way for television to get funded, still very, very lucrative for broadcast and cable. $12 billion approximately spent on broadcast and cable ads in the fourth quarter of 2014, but that's down from 2013. At the same time, the mobile video ad spending in the U.S. more than doubled to $1.5 billion, still significantly less than what's spent on TV, but online video as a whole is about a $3 billion ad spend each year. So the numbers are changing. While traditional TV viewing starts to diminish and traditional TV ad spending starts to diminish, online, mobile viewing and spending does increase. Some of you may very well be cord cutters. My family is a cord cutter, but the only thing that drives my husband nuts is that it's really challenging for him to figure out how to watch live sports. But for those in your age range, 24% of TV viewers ages 18 to 34 no longer get any kind of traditional pay TV service. They're often cord nevers, meaning they've never paid for TV subscriptions. So we use Roku in my house, Sling TV, another example. So there are lots of ways to avoid cable TV altogether and get much of the programming that you want, although not everything. And this, of course, is eating into cable, satellite, and broadcast TV profits. But my theory is eventually we will have to pay the piper as cord cutters. So, if the people who produce television programming aren't getting money from advertisers and they're not getting money from subscriptions, guess what? They won't keep producing programming. So eventually we're going to have to figure this out. But the industry is going through a pretty significant period of chaos while all of this is determined. Now, I will say, I think that many of the networks, for example, are being proactive in trying to figure this out. They're not just going to let cord cutting happen to them. Many have streaming strategies, and I think that you're going to see more and more instances in which you want to watch, the finale of some important TV show. You're going to have to pay a premium to stream it. Television is still very much a social force. It continues to bring the world into your home in an easy-to-consume format. I think one of the real reasons why television has remained so popular is it is a passive experience. You don't have to work hard to let television wash over you. Television is still a source of shared experience. Watching the Super Bowl is still a social event for many people, and you want to have the game on a widescreen, flat screen, HD TV so that you can share it with your friends in living color. Also still a major component of leisure activity, 5 hours on average a day. I have to say, I don't know who these people are. They must just have that TV on all day long. I can't remember the last time I would have watched 5 hours of television in a single day. Video from non-TV sources, though, are growing in popularity. There is no doubt that the traditional method of delivering video content has been changed forever by new technologies. So what is the future of television? I actually wrote a piece for a British magazine not too long ago on what I saw as the future of television news, but part of figuring out the future of television involves us thinking about what is happening currently and what's likely to continue to happen. So video on demand, whether that's video on demand through streaming services or however that happens, will continue to grow. Interacting with programming, I would expect to see more and more of that. There's this whole concept of social TV in which people interact on Twitter or Facebook or other forms of social media and share their thoughts and views about what's happening on a program. There's some good research out there that says you can actually predict how well a program is going to do by monitoring the social media activity around it. Redefining television, this is very interesting to me. What do we mean by television? If I'm watching it on my mobile device, am I watching television? If I am streaming the program over the internet and watching it on my TV, is it still television? Is it the device that matters? Is it the format? How important is it to figure that out? Or is it similar to books? We talk about audio books, right? We talk about books that we're reading on tablets, but we still call them books. So what defines television? And then finally, as we move away from broadcast and cable and satellite to cord cutting, what does that do to the business of television? How does that have to change in order for us to continue to get the programming that we've come to enjoy and has been such an important part of our lives?